in all honesty, don't try to do it on your own. Life is tough, right? It is tough, and it's going to be even harder when we try to, wrestle and struggle on our own.
That's right.
Surround ourselves with those that God, brings around us.
Sun will shine again. Better just coming on the horizon. The rain will finally end. Clouds disappearing. Tomorrow's your friend.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Sweet Spot. We are so excited that you've joined us today. And
Glad you're in the house.
You were here with us last week. You were part of a powerful story from my girl Josephine, who I call my shero, and she is with us again today in the Sweet Spot. Josie, welcome back.
Thank you for having me back.
Welcome back to the
Thank
Sweet
you.
Spot. Now, we're going to dive right in because your story is just riveting. And we left off last week. You were sharing with us a little bit about your upbringing and how you grew up. But we left off with you sharing a powerful story about how you had fallen in love and that relationship had broken off and how broken it left you. And we would like to pick up at that very same point where we left off, if you don't mind. If we're going to dive right in because I know our listeners can't wait to hear this. And if they tuned in last week, and if you didn't tune in last week, you can catch it on podcast. So go back, see the first episode so that you'll catch up with what we're talking about today.
Awesome.
So if you want to just take up from where we left off on the last episode, that would be great.
So at the time, again, just going back to the relationship, right, and I had moved back home with my mom, and my mom was there trying to encourage me. I'd stopped working because I couldn't function anymore, right, at work, and taken a leave of absence throughout that time. When I'd taken the leave of absence, I had the partner that I was with, her brother-in-law worked in construction.
Okay.
Right, and I still had relationships with the family, right, and I guess really just to get out of the house and start doing something, it was suggested that I go work with him, right, just to get out of the house and to kind of just get myself back up. Right, so I did that. That's how I got into construction.
Okay.
Right, so I started off as a laborer. I would go out there and just, do whatever, digging, odd stuff, that sort of stuff. And it was at that point where he invited me to church. Right, so he's like, well, hey, why do you come to church with us? And I'm like, heck no, I can't come to church with you. I felt like, I said to him, I would turn into a pillar of salt. Right, I couldn't go in there because I knew all the stuff that I was involved in and just the mess of my life, and I felt that I couldn't go in there. Right, and I remember one day after work, finished working with him, I went over and was hanging out at his house, and his wife, again, the invitation, just come to church with us, and I shared the same thing with her. I'm like, I can't come, and they said, well, honestly, God just says, come as you are. Right, and we went back and forth for a while with the invitation. I didn't jump on it right away, right? And I don't know what happened, but one morning I woke up Sunday morning. I'm living in Oshawa with my mom. Wake up Sunday morning, 6 o'clock in the morning. Says, Mom, I'm going to church. The church started at 8 o'clock. I got up at 6. I think I left my house roughly about 7 o'clock. Got there for 8 o'clock. Service.
Wow.
This is in Brampton, so from Oshawa to Brampton. And it was in that service where the pastor was preaching, and everything that he said really just connected with me. And I broke down, right? So they gave that, call, right, to accept Christ. And even if I wanted to stop myself, I wouldn't have been able to. I think it was just automatic where I was drawn, I was pulled, right, to the altar. And on that day, I gave my heart to Christ.
Just like that.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Right?
Wow. Do you
And-
remember something specific that he said that spoke to you?
And I think it just really goes back to what John, the person that I was working with at the time, and really just I didn't have to be perfect. I didn't have to try and figure it all out or make myself, fix myself up.
Yes.
Right? Like literally, don't worry about, everything else, but just as you are, who you are, right? In your brokenness, just come, right? And for the first time, because prior to that, I honestly didn't think I would fit in and that I could do that. Because all the stuff that I was going through and the life that I was living, I didn't think I could, and so I accepted the call. And, the church that we're going to at the time was very, loving towards me. They didn't really know my stuff. Anyhow, and that was when I met Pastor Rob and Pastor Tanya. That's January 23rd of 2005.
Wow.
And I remember that date significantly because that's when my life changed.
Yes.
Right?
Wow.
So then I drove home, and when I got home, I was just reflecting on the service and just still weeping and crying out to God. And I said, okay, Lord, whatever you want from me, I'll do it. Because I knew He was calling me. I
Yes.
knew, constant that tug
That
was
tug,
there.
yes.
Right? And at that point, I said, okay, whatever you want, I'll do it. And I completely just surrendered and, said I was going to trust God and follow, in whatever He calls me to do.
That's
Now
amazing.
that's obedience.
Want to put a little comma there, right? And just kind of ask, when did you tell your mom?
When did I share with her?
Yes.
It would have been when I got home because again, my mom and I were very close, right? So I could tell, and in all honesty, it was something that she was praying for a long time.
So that's what I want to know. How did she react?
Oh my goodness! I mean, how could you not be? I don't even know the word for it, but I know for her it was just an answered prayer, right? My mom. It was after I got saved that she had a Bible, and I guess for quite some time, I think she even forgot that she had placed a picture of me in her Bible, right? And my mom was always really just praying for me, right? And shortly after that, the picture fell out of her Bible, right? But the whole, and I know it sounds
Thank
really
God,
wacky,
right?
but that's the
That's
whole time
amazing.
she was really praying and asking the Lord to move.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And so this whole idea, I don't want us to miss this. I don't want us to miss it. I don't want to miss it. So the idea here is come as you are.
Absolutely,
right?
yeah.
And the greater understanding is that we can't do it by ourselves
No, you
anyway,
can't.
right? If we could do it by ourselves, we wouldn't need
That's right.
Him.
Absolutely.
And the fact is, 100% of us, 100% of us, right, are in need of a Savior.
Absolutely.
None of us are any good on
That's
our
right.
own.
That's right. And one of the things that I've also, in that process, learned through the people that the Lord was surrounding me by. So I was concerned about my friends, right? I didn't want to have to give up my friends. I didn't want to have to really give up anything, right? And the awesome thing is, those that the Lord surrounded me with during the early stage of my walk, right? I never, they were never saying, okay, well, you have to stop doing this, you have to stop doing that, you have to there was no demands on me, having to change anything, right? And I think that was awesome in the sense that, they didn't put that demand on me, but in the process of really just obviously reading the Word and getting to know God and getting to know myself, I started changing. Right?
Yes.
So it was nothing that, I had to force, no one had to force, and in all honesty, I didn't really focus too much on what I had to, give up or change. Right?
And you still love them, just
Absolutely.
just that
Absolutely.
you've changed, and so
Yes.
your interests have changed, and so the things you like to do naturally change there, right?
Absolutely.
And,
Absolutely.
but still love and embrace them.
Absolutely.
Really. So,
Yeah,
right.
and I still have, I can't say that we talk on a regular, right? But I still have relationships, with some of them. We'll touch base every now and then, right? But they obviously know, the life that I'm living now, right? Yeah.
So what was the next big move?
After that,
Yes.
well, the next, definitely I would say I got baptized, so that was pretty major for me, right? And I would say that would be my first marriage. I call that my
Yes.
first marriage.
Oh,
That's
very
awesome.
Right,
good.
yeah,
Yes.
Right.
That's,
Yeah.
commitment
so-
first to God.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. I throughout that time prior to, for my baptism and after that, I spent a number of years really just making myself available to do whatever God wanted me to do. So I poured my heart out, really just working, volunteering within the church, and
Just submerged yourself in.
Yeah, I did. Right, and for me, it was important to really start figuring out who I was, right? And then I really need to figure out, okay, who this God is. Okay, you've been calling me,
Right.
right? Who are you,
Right.
And what do you want, right? And for 9 years, a good 9 years is really where I spent just pouring, myself into the things that I felt I was being called to do.
So once you get through that, and you feel like your life is pretty much put back together again, and you're happy, what happens next?
After, so the 9 years of that relationship, and then obviously just really praying and asking the Lord to send somebody, right, into my life, right? And I remember a friend of mine, I would say one of my closest friends, right? When at the time when I had just met her, she pretty much, told me that I wasn't going to find anybody just, I guess, burying myself in
Right,
church.
right.
She really encouraged me to, put myself out there, right? So I was like, well, I guess at one point I believed that, the Lord was just going to send that person
Right.
my way. Well,
Right.
it didn't work that way, right? So I went online, right? And the post that I did, my profile, I was very specific, right? A passion for God. Seriously, I was like, because I didn't want to do it any other way.
Right.
I know what life was like
Right.
before,
Yes.
right? So, in the profile that I'd put up, just stating the fact that I have a passion for God. I'm very committed to ministry and doing things, for God. And I was really looking for somebody that also had that heart and passion, right? And I also made it known that I was not willing to compromise, right, on that. And in the process of the online dating, right, I found my husband. Right, so 9 years after the fact, so that being 2014, September 6th of 2014, right, we got married.
So, so when you say you found him, was it the first person?
No.
Yes, yeah.
Interesting. I mean, when you're online, man, you're going to get hundreds.
Oh, you're
going to
get all kind of- yeah,
right.
absolutely.
Reaching out to you.
Absolutely.
And I'll be honest, throughout the whole process, I always said, okay, Lord, you point me in the right direction. So when I would go online and I'd see a lot of foolishness, because what they were doing was looking at the actual pictures versus actually reading and understanding what I was saying. And the minute I realized people were commenting on the look, I would delete. So I automatically delete. Right. Then with regards to how I found him was reading his profile, and it pretty much it came into
Matched
a
up.
line with what I was looking for. So I sent him a message, right, and then he had messaged me back, right. It probably so. Say, for example, I'd send him the message on Friday. It'd take a week later before I actually responded. Because at the time I was busy just focusing on what I was doing, right? And so we went back and forth for a while, really just talking, right? And getting to know each other. And then we met on a Wednesday at Tim Hortons. And I said, anybody that I meet, I want to meet on a weekday. Because on a weekday, I'm just scruff.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right? Just
Yes.
average.
You're real,
right?
girl.
On
You're
a
real.
Sunday,
Yes.
you're going to be all done up. You
Yes.
look good.
Yes.
Right? And I didn't
You're
want to meet
real.
I didn't want to meet anybody seeing me looking,
Right.
all made up. Just see me for who I am. Right? And so
I love
when we
that.
met at the Tim Hortons, I just average, right? And we sat and we talked for hours and really just talked with him, and we connected, right? And I didn't have to ask him or invite him to church. Automatically he was like, well, when are you going to invite me to your church? I'm like, all right.
That's awesome.
So then I invited him on to church, and I guess that was a big thing because at the time they've never seen me with anybody.
Right.
Right. So it was out of the norm for
Right.
anybody, right? Really, any male to be with me. Right. So yeah, he came out, and I did let him know. I warned him before. At the time, I was doing youth ministry, so I said, "Well, my youth has the right to ask you whatever they want to ask you.
Right.
Right? My pastors have the right to ask you whatever they want to ask you.
Yes.
Same goes for my family.
Yes.
So don't be surprised if
Right.
they ask you
Right.
a ton of questions. Right? And he was cool with it. Right? He was cool with it.
That's
yeah.
amazing.
And I mean, so he totally. Just it fit in. It felt good. You know what I mean? And then prior to throughout the whole time too, I was asking the Lord to confirm: is this the person that you have for me? And one of the things that I did request, I said, Lord, I don't want it to come from anybody that was close to me, because at the end of the
Right.
day,
Yeah.
they want
Yeah.
that for
That's
you,
right.
So I didn't want the Lord to, to be confirmed by anybody that was close to me. And what had happened was two individuals that I was not close to in the church, right? One, which was, I guess, one of our intercessor prayer ladies at the time, came and said, she had a dream, and the Lord, said that you can trust him. Right, and then another person that I wasn't very close with. To be honest, we were at odds. Right, we didn't really get along, and she had questioned the, I guess the realness of the relationship, and she came to me and confessed and said, "Josie, I questioned whether or not that was, how can you really just fall in love with somebody so soon?" And she stated to me that the Lord told her not to question it because it was something that He was doing. Right, and so those two confirmations pretty much, spoke to me and said, at the end of the day, I'm going to trust what God's doing. Right, and yeah.
Now, for our listeners, if there's someone out there that's thinking, so how did she go from one lifestyle over to a different lifestyle? And it's because there are people out there that are trying to figure this out,
Right.
and praying that can happen,
Correct.
right? So can you just kind of briefly say, how did God do that transition for you?
I think in my heart, to be honest, I knew that I felt the way I was living wasn't what God intended, right? And I knew I couldn't change myself because at the time when my mom said, "Well, get out of it," I was like,
Right.
"Okay, Mom," and I was trying to change, right? But I just couldn't do it on my own. And it was only when I accepted Christ, where I said, "Okay, Lord, whatever it is that you want, I'll do it. I'm going to trust you." And it was through accepting Christ and then through
And trusting
reading the
Him,
Word, right, and getting to know, it was so important to me to get to know who God is, and then in the process get to know who I am. And once I began to understand who I am, and again, really just, I guess, my purpose, then I honestly began to understand that there was a greater purpose, and just really
Amen.
trust Him in the process.
That's it. That's the thing. Trust Him. Yeah. That's it.
So you got married.
Yeah.
How soon?
Wow, we met in February and we got married in September of the same year.
Oh,
Wow. Yes.
About 6
Yes.
months or so
Yes.
after, right? And that in itself was, again, just really trusting and believing that this is what God, had in mind for both of us, right? And He was also a firm believer that this is the Lord, had sent me for Him, and He was for me. Yeah.
Okay, so now when you get married, everybody's asking, how about the babies?
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, that, and we never were trying to have children. We just, again, okay, Lord, whatever you have in mind, right? So throughout that, the first time I got pregnant and, sadly had a miscarriage, right? And again, we weren't preventing, weren't
Right.
trying,
Right.
throughout the whole process. Again, got pregnant, miscarriage,
Second time.
Second time. Right? And at this point, you're kind of like feeling a ways, right? And, still trusting and believing God. Okay, Lord, I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust you.
Are you still trusting and believing?
Absolutely.
At that point?
Absolutely.
Any animosity?
No, and the reason why I say that, I've always, even up to my, with regards to the marriage, I've always believed at the end of the day, whatever God has for me will be for me. And I honestly believe that.
Yes.
Right? It may not necessarily, come in the time that I want it to or how I want it to, but I truly believe at the end of the day that, whatever He has in mind for me will be. Right? So got pregnant again, now the third miscarriage. That one was very difficult, right? Because that one, pregnancy lasted a little bit longer, right? 3 months. A little bit over 3 months, and we really believe, okay, we were good, right? So that was extremely difficult to really manage. And then I think at this point we're starting to figure, okay, well, maybe we should just, hold off, right? Start doing whatever, preventing or taking certain measures, right? And I can't remember how long after, maybe it was a following year or so, that I got pregnant again, and that was in 2016. So this pregnancy, carried through for a good, length of time. Everything had seemed fine, that sort of stuff. And, the doctors then, I guess through some tests, had contacted me and said, well, there might be some complications or whatever with the pregnancy, right? And shared with me that there's a possibility of Down syndrome for the baby. Right, so I said, okay, well, that's fine. And they give you the option of if you want to terminate the pregnancy. And we said, no, we're going to, walk it through. We're going to trust God in that. And both my husband and I agreed. And then, so that was maybe about maybe a month or so after they called back and said, actually, there's a more serious concern, right? It's not Down syndrome. Right. What they're detecting is that the baby has a rare genetic disease called trisomy 18.
Okay.
Right. And in that, I guess it affects the major organs. Within the baby. So again, given the option of whether or not we want to terminate the pregnancy, and we said no, we're going to follow through. Right, with that. And, throughout the whole time, obviously, we're praying and believing God that things would change. And, so leading up to, I guess, closer now to Jedediah, right, being born. So on February the 3rd, right, we had Jedediah, right? Yeah. Wow. And
so how'd you come up with the name?
I've always really just biblical. I always said that I wanted my children's name to have a very, like a biblical meaning, right? So, and then with my name, starting with a J and Gerald's, J, right? We wanted to keep it that as well, right? So, we really I searched, the Bible and then passed it by my husband and he agreed. And plus I wanted it to be something different, right? Yeah. So Jedediah really just sat with both of us, right? And the beauty of that is, his name means beloved of God. Yes. Right? So Jedediah Samuel, which is his dad's middle name, Johnson. Right?
Beautiful.
So
So you have Jedediah, and then what happens?
When he, so I had a cesarean. When they took him out, his delivery, I guess, wasn't the typical delivery because, most deliveries, you would hear your baby crying, that sort of stuff. That wasn't the case with Jedediah. And just to jump back a bit, when I went into the delivery room, one of the things that was so important to me was having worship in there, and they allowed me to have worship, right, throughout the delivery. Right, and Gerald was right there with us. So when they took out Jedediah, right? He wasn't crying. I don't really think he was fully. They had to work on him to bring him back. Yeah,
Right.
resuscitate him.
Yes.
Within that as well, they had asked me a number of times, should the pregnancy not go or the delivery not go well, what do you want us to do? And I said, do whatever you can within your power. At the end of the day, God's going to do what He does.
Right.
Right. So yeah, I want you
Right.
to use whatever
Right.
necessary
Yes.
to, for him. So delivered, he's breathing now, right? But again, the complications with him, right? So then they had to take. He went from I was in Sunnybrook, then they had to send him to Sick Kids, right? So. I guess his vital signs and all that wasn't very strong, so he needed help to breathe and that sort of stuff. So,
After the delivery, we get Jedediah. He goes over to Sick Kids. When he's at Sick Kids, what did the doctor say to you? What happened?
all the news, all the reports that I got was really just not good. Right, stating first of all, they didn't think he was going to make it through the delivery or through the pregnancy. So they had already, pretty much let me know. Well, we're not really sure if he's going to survive. That sort of stuff, right? He gets to Sick Kids. They were able to, I guess, sustain him, right? And they came back with the news with regards to the different complications pertaining to his heart, his kidney, his lungs. Just all, again, the main organs weren't functioning, I guess, as good as they wanted it to. So they just continued to do whatever they could within their power. So he was in Sick Kids for 6 weeks. Throughout that 6 weeks, it was really just a matter of really just praying, having various people pray and, continue to trust and believe that God was going to, do.
Delivery.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then what happened?
Then after that, it was on March 16 that he had passed away. Right, but in all honesty, the beauty of that is I had him for 6 weeks, right? And the way that I looked at it is, the 3 miscarriages that I had before, I didn't have the opportunity to make those babies. And here is, my one son that I actually get to meet. And I got to love on him. I got to pray with him. I got to sing worship with him, right? I got to hold him, right? Between myself, my husband, and our son got to hold him. My mother was there. And so I got to do a whole lot more with him than the doctors ever expected, right? And, in that as well, right, we had an opportunity really just to pray with other moms that were in there with their sick babies, right? One of the babies, Mackenzie, right, that they had claimed was brain dead, and they were encouraging the mother, right, to take the baby off life support. I had an opportunity to speak with that mother, right, and really just share Christ with her. And, in that process, I asked her if she believed, because I wanted to pray with Mackenzie. I had the opportunity to anoint Mackenzie with oil, pray with Mackenzie, and the very baby that they said was brain dead came back alive. Right, to the point where on Easter service, Mackenzie and her mom were able to attend
Praise
our Sunday
God.
service. Right, so Mackenzie, at the end of the day, right, was brought back to life. There's other moms in there that I, continue to encourage and to pray with.
In your lowest low, in the hardest thing that you've probably had to experience in your life, God used you
Yes.
in a powerful way.
And you had the strength and the will to pray for someone else's child when yours had just passed.
While we were walking through it.
Wow.
Like I said, you're my hero, Joseph.
Yes.
Like I just, I have no words right now. That's powerful.
So,
Now, if you could just share something with me, because we're out of time.
Yep.
But if you could share one thing with, whether it's moms that are, have experienced the loss of a child, whether it's someone who's trying to get out of a relationship that they shouldn't, whatever your heart is on your heart, if you can just share something encouraging to her, and maybe a favorite scripture, and we'll close with that.
Okay. I would honestly say, the reason why I was able to walk through all this is because I didn't try to do it on my own. I was surrounded with, a church family. I was surrounded by my family, and really just the Word. What I did throughout that whole journey was I would listen to the Psalms. Right, night after night, I just literally continued to pour, the Word in me to keep me, keep me moving, keep me encouraged. Right, so in all honesty, don't try to do it on your own. Life is tough. Right, it is tough, and it's going to be even harder when we try to, wrestle and struggle on our own.
That's right.
Surround ourselves with those that God, brings around us. Right. My favorite scripture, I would say, would be Matthew 6:33, and it says, "Seek first the kingdom of God and His righteousness,
Yes,
and all these things shall be added unto you."
Yes.
Yeah.
Amen.
And so I seek Him.
Amen.
Right, and I praise God.
Well, Josie, thank you so much. Your story
Thank you.
is powerful. And I'm sure there are many listeners and viewers who are going to be touched.
Praise God.
And I know that there are lives that are going to be changed
Praise God.
from you sharing your story. So thank you for being so vulnerable and allowing God to use you the way that He has used you
Yes.
today. So thank you for joining us.
And
on
we
this
love
Friday.
you
And we
dearly.
love you. Absolutely. And to our listeners and our viewers, we just thank you so much for tuning in. And if you missed last week's episode with Josie, please go back and take a look at that, because her story really is powerful, and I'm sure there is lots that you can learn from her story. Until next time, we want you to stay in your sweet spot and remember to allow God to use you, and God will meet you no matter what you're going through. He will meet you where you are. Just trust Him. Stay in your sweet spot.
Not to the challenge, but through the challenge.
Amen.
That's the sweet spot.
Sun will shine